An emergency room physician named Harry tells a story. He talks about one night on his shift in a busy emergency room, a woman was brought in about to give birth. And they, rapidly wheeled her into the exam room, and then they paged him immediately, and he stepped in and took one look at her and knew that if that OB wasn't in the hospital right that moment, that he was going to end up delivering this baby. And so he likes delivering babies, right? And so he's pleased by that. And so the nurses had returned, and they were opening the delivery packs, and the woman's husband arrived. And they stood on either side of Harry, supporting her legs, and then the baby was born. While the little girl was still attached to her mother, Harry laid her along his left forearm, holding the back of her head in his left hand, and he took a suction bulb in his right and began to clear her mouth and nose of mucus. And suddenly, the baby opened her eyes and looked directly at him. And in that moment, Harry stepped past his technical role and realized a very simple thing: that he was the first human being this baby had ever seen. And he felt his heart go out to hear her and welcome from all people everywhere, and tears came to his eyes. And while Harry has delivered hundreds, probably more than that, of babies, he says that he had never let himself experience the meaning of what he was doing before. We listen to this story from Luke, and it's one of those, we hear it every year, actually, or some version of it. And we historically look at this, that it's a story about call, about answering the call to discipleship, and it is. But I think at the heart of call, there's something even deeper. I think that this story is also about meaning and how we find meaning in the world. Now, I'm intrigued by this story mostly because I feel for these guys, right? I mean, they've been all day in the hot sun, dropping their nets, pulling up nothing, moving across the lake, dropping their nets, pulling up nothing. Back-breaking labor. They catch nothing, and they finally get to shore, and they're like, forget it, we're going home. They're trying to clean up the mess, and here comes this guy. And he not only just kind of commandeers Peter's boat, he doesn't ask, he just kind of crawls in and goes, hey, take me out. And Peter's like, what? And then he tells him to do it again. I know you're tired. I know you're exhausted. I know you've been doing this all day, but you haven't been doing it with me. So let's do it again. And so reluctantly and probably tiredly and probably crankily, right? They push the boat back out, they drop the nets, and they pull in this huge haul. So Luke's Jesus finds these men exactly where they live. And I wonder, though, why he waited until the end of the day. He didn't come at them they all had a good night's sleep and a hearty breakfast and they're ready to roll. He waits till they're exhausted and they don't think they can lift one more net. They just want to go home, and what is that about? And I think that's true a lot. I don't really remember, at least personally, being nudged by the Spirit to do something that was going to be work on a day when I felt great. I don't know, maybe there's not enough days I feel great. I don't know what that is about, but I feel for these guys. It's like I'm already tired. I don't want to do one more thing. And I know that you know what I'm talking about. And yet that's the moment when Jesus comes forward and says, hey, that thing you're doing, do it again. And maybe it's because when we're tired and exhausted, while we can put up a verbal fight, we don't have enough energy to go all in on the fighting. And so maybe we're just more open when we're tired. I don't know. But I know it's been true in my life as well, that it's when I don't think I really can do one more thing that I end up doing one more thing. The other thing I loved about this story, again, is that they're not called in their ordinary environment and then pulled out of it and sent, right? This all happens right where they live. That is in the very ordinariness, is that a word, of their everyday working and moving and living in the world that Jesus finds them. And I think it's true for us as well. We're called in our ordinary, everyday lives not to be led out of our lives, but to welcome the divine presence into it. And I think what that is really the beauty of this story. That no matter how tired we are, that when we open our eyes and our hearts and are faithful, that God's presence becomes known to us in the ordinary things. Because some of us have experiences like St. Paul, where we have an experience of God and we fall off our horse and we go, ooh, I'm converted. Most of us don't. Some of us hear the voice of God very clearly that says, pick up and go do that thing. But most of us don't. Because the truth of the matter is, for most of us, Jesus is just in our normal everyday lives. Just in the mundane, ordinary things that we do every day. That's where Jesus shows up and whispers in our ear and says, that thing that you're good at, that thing you've been doing, let's go do it one more time. And always, if we pay attention to the stories, always the response, if our response is faithfulness like it was for Peter, then we are met with abundance, with an overflowing of the thing we were looking for from the beginning. 2 full nets worth. Because that's how the divine always does it. Just when we think we are empty, if we just push past it a little, even if it's only spiritually, and we say yes, we are met with a divine presence in an abundance that we could never imagine existed. And ultimately, I think that's what discipleship is. Because once we've had an experience of that God, of a God who doesn't know much more, honestly, than giving and filling and flowing us over. Once we have experienced that kind of God, we remember to whom we belong. And once we remember to whom we belong, discipleship is easy because we can't help it. We simply can't help it. And so Jesus and Peter and the story just challenge us today to say, what's the one next step that you might be called to make in your life, in your relationships, in this congregation? What's that next step? Trusting that if we take it, that we will be met with the abundant presence of the divine every time. And I don't know about you, but no matter how tired I get, that's always a really beautiful thing.